Okay. Hi, everyone. So yeah, still in the topic of transportation, but I want to talk to you about freight or cargo and how we're building the booking platform for the world of cargo. And really, this is one of the world's largest, most complex industries, one of the biggest carbon emitters. And yet it's entirely undigitalized or largely undigitalized, creating a really a huge opportunity. For me, my journey in freight started about 12 years ago when I happened to be a CEO of Lightech, making these little power supplies for LED lights and other forms of light. And we produced them, we designed them here in Israel, we produced them in South China. And every day we were transporting these goods by ocean and by air from China to the United States to Europe like many importers and exporters do. And I was shocked to discover how offline the whole process is. I thought that booking a container would be like booking a flight. You go online, you see the prices, you compare, you book, but it's a very, very offline process. Often we would wait a couple of days just for a price quote. And when we got the actual invoice, it didn't match the price quote. So very, very old-fashioned experience. And this is a big issue. $19 trillion of goods are imported and exported every year. So it's an incredibly large and important industry. It's a big part of what creates millions of jobs and what creates all of the consumer choice that we have. And yet this entire industry is largely offline. Just a little bit about the structure of international freight. This is the least that you need to do. You've got that you need to know to understand our business. You've got the carriers, the airlines, the ocean liners, the trucking companies, and then most shipments are arranged by a freight forwarder. There are 100,000 freight forwarders in the world. Some of the biggest freight forwarders are very close to you in Zurich, like Kuehne + Nagel are number one. They're in Schindellegi near Zurich, and there are often 2 or 3 freight forwarders involved in a transaction. And then you have what we call the shippers, the actual importer and exporter who's having something shipped. And so most transactions in international trade will actually have a couple, 1 or 2 or 3 intermediaries involved. And most of the communication is manual, phone calls, emails, human to human communication. As a result of that, you get an industry which is really very inefficient. People are paying too much. They're paying for too many intermediaries and for too much human intermediation. And as a result, there are many, many billions, I would say tens of billions of wasted dollars every year. And also from a carbon footprint perspective, wasted utilization. So pre-COVID, 50% of air cargo capacity was unutilized. And therefore the carbon footprint per kilo, which is already very high, is actually doubly high because of the underutilization and all the other problems you'd expect from an industry which is very offline. And so after I sold that company Lightech, I saw this as a really exciting opportunity for my next business, and that's why I started Freightos almost 10 years ago, with a vision of bringing some of the same digital convenience that we have in passenger travel and retail and banking, bringing it to this whole industry. Sometimes I think that international freight is sort of the last big industry to go through a digital revolution, and that's what we wanted to lead. And so our vision is to be the end-to-end booking platform, booking and payment platform. And the goal is to make international shipping just as fast and cost-effective and just as predictable as passenger travel and other industries, pre-COVID at least, passenger travel, as a way of expanding global trade, making global trade more efficient and greater between people all around the world. So that's our vision. Just a few parameters of the company. We've raised $120 million to date. We've got our main offices here in Jerusalem, in Barcelona, in Ramallah, Palestine, and then in various other locations around the world. This is a little out of date. I think we're now 300 people. And we've got some very, very experienced investors like Bob Mylod, who's the chairman of the Booking.com group, the largest online travel agent, and several other very well-known venture capitalists. And the footprint of Freightos is like this. We're a global booking platform, and we aim to connect both the carriers to the freight forwarders. That's done by our subsidiary WebCargo, a company that we acquired in Barcelona, and then to connect the freight forwarders to the shippers, Freightos.com. For those who know the travel agent, Freightos.com is more or less parallel to Booking.com or Expedia, and WebCargo is more or less parallel to Sabre or Amadeus. It's interesting that in the passenger travel, Sabre and Amadeus existed. Sabre went back to the 1960s. Amadeus went back to the 1980s. So passenger travel has decades of digital infrastructure to build on. In international freight, there's no such thing. So Freightos is a relatively complex startup because we had to build our own Sabre and Amadeus before we could build our own Booking.com or Expedia. So we've got sort of two major parts to our platform. In addition, we provide SaaS tools to the freight forwarders, and we also have, coming out of all of this, a lot of exhaust data. So we publish the leading indexes, the FBX index for the daily price of container shipping around the world, FAX, the Freightos Air Index. So coming out of all of this is some of the indexes for pricing in the industry. We've got created a huge network. We work with about 15 airline groups, about 30 airlines in total, several ocean liners. We work with about 2,000, by now it's actually 2,500 freight forwarders, including many of the biggest freight forwarders in the world. And we work with about 10,000 small importers and exporters, but also a number of big enterprises. Only 2 of them I've got permission to mention right now, but we work with a number of very large enterprises to make their freight procurement more efficient. And the way it works, I won't go into detail, but it's just what you'd expect. You can search, you can compare rates instantly instead of waiting 2 or 3 days. You can book, you can pay on platform, and then you can manage your shipment. So we make a very smooth experience for the importers and exporters, but under the hood is a huge amount of complexity. We have to collect thousands of Excel sheets from around the world with prices of air and ocean and rail and trucking, from all different countries and currencies. So a lot of complexity, a lot of algorithms and data under the hood, and then a very simple booking experience on the front end. One thing which has been a key part of Freightos for some years already is not just calculating the 2 most famous parameters in the industry of the time and price, but also the carbon footprint. And we've always allowed people, or for some years already, we've allowed the importers and exporters to prioritize the different price quotes, which they get instantly based on time, price, and carbon footprint. And there are some huge differences between different modes, particularly between air and ocean, but also between different routes. So there are big differences in the carbon footprint between different options. So we're getting some extreme growth, particularly with the airlines, but also in other parts. On the left here, we don't disclose specific numbers, but you can see the growth in electronic airline bookings coming through our platform. It's grown well over 1,000% year on year. The different blue lines represent more and more airlines joining. And then on the right, you can see the cohort chart of our freight forwarder buyers who are booking on the platform. And the great thing about these cohort charts is they slope upwards. So once freight forwarders start to book on our system, we don't lose them. Quite the contrary, the same freight forwarders book more and more and more each month, which is a very exciting growth dynamic. Okay, so to sum up, we're taking on a very big problem, which is digitalizing one of the biggest, most complex industries in the world. I believe that over the last few years, we have selected the team, the investors. We'll be looking for more investors as well next year for a Series D, the tech, and an incredible network of carriers, freight forwarders, and importers and exporters. And I believe we have the ingredients to go ahead and really digitalize this huge, critical industry. Thank you very much.